So in the last year and a half or so, I've discovered a very simple trick that helps us more than 3x ROAS in some cases by actually leaving the US bubble. What I mean by that is everyone is just so focused on running ads in the US, but there are other markets by which you can easily expand to and actually get much higher ad results. So I want to talk about why that is and what are some ways in which you can escape this US bubble and actually make a lot more money for your e-commerce, info product, or SaaS business. If you're new to the channel, you know who I am. My name is Justin and I'm the founder at paidadvertising.com, where on the one hand, we help businesses implement scalable ad engines, and on the other, we grow e-com and info businesses to multi-seven figures with paid ads. With that being said, in the last year, we've profitably spent and advised on over $15 million in ad spend on the behalf of our clients. And let's get straight into today's video. And so what I have in front of me is a blank Canva on my iPad. And I want to talk about a few client examples that I've had, and even one with my own business, of how going out of the US market can actually lead to much better results for many of you guys. And so here's the US, okay? So I'm going to start by writing that. So the US is the market that everyone wants to get into, okay? The market. I'm going to put that with a star. Everyone wants to get into the US. It's like the dream of any business owner, okay? And most of the time, I actually see people either going US first or they really want to go into the US super fast. So if somebody starts, let's say in France, their goal is like, hey, within 6 months, I want to start expanding to the US. Or it's like that market that everybody sees as the holy grail. But the thing is, that's the case for pretty much everyone around the world. You're competing against a country who has 300 million people, which has their own entrepreneurs, and then every other country in the world who has entrepreneurs wanting to also export and sell to the US. And so therefore, it's probably, and arguably speaking, the most sophisticated and saturated market on earth across arguably every single verticals, okay? The sophistication of the market is as high as it gets, okay? There is no market in the world, or barely any market in the world, that is as sophisticated as the US market. Now, a couple of stats I found utilizing Perplexity AI to kind of bring up in this video is the average American sees about 4,000 to 10,000 ads every single day across social media or in person. Now, I don't know, I'm a Canadian personally, and whenever I go to the US, every time I go there, I'm just flabbergasted by the amount of ads that you see everywhere. Billboards, personal injury lawyers, watches. It's like, it's everywhere. Much more present, as an example, than it is in Canada. And I'm just talking about traditional media. Now, it's not even to talk about social media, like what we typically do on this channel. And the US also leads in the largest advertising market. And so some stats again that I have right here is the US leads in total ad spend by market in the world. And therefore, the US also has the highest CPM rates of pretty much any media in the world. And I think this is very relevant to add right here. So if I put, CPM plus also right here, what I mean by that is, well, if there is more ad spend and more advertisers in the US than any other country in the world, then that means there's more competition. And if there's more competition, then every sort of digital platform works with an auction system. And so what I mean by that is, well, if you or I are both trying to advertise to the same audience, you or I are going against each other, right? It's like we're trying to beat each other for a spot on the same audience's feed. Well, if we're magnifying that by thousands, if not millions of advertisers trying to go for the same audience, then the auctions is increasing, right? Like the highest bidder become even higher. And so that being said, it increases CPMs. So cost to advertise are the highest in the world. The market is as sophisticated as any other market because they're exposed to more ads than any other market. I'll put that with a little asterisk, by the way, because in my research, I also found that some Asian countries like Indonesia, as an example, have a very high traditional media, more specifically TV exposure, especially when it comes to advertising. But for the sake of this, again, I'm going to talk mainly to all of us direct-to-consumer marketers, or even B2B for that matter, especially in the Western side of the world. And so kind of going along those lines, what I mean by sophistication and what happens when you have a high sophistication in a market is now you have to come out with new mechanisms. You have to come out with new claims. You have to come out with new guarantees. And that's where you end up at a point where all the way at the end of a most sophisticated market, you're in stage 5, or therefore using identification. And what I mean by that is now the market has to resonate with the brand's message, vision, and or the owner itself before buying, because they've heard everything there is to hear about claims and whatnot. We've seen that tremendously, especially within the coaching and info product space over the last year and a half. That's why now there's a rise of people talking about personal brands, even in the e-commerce space. People talking about creator-led businesses, right? Because those businesses get more sales because the market is so sophisticated that they have to go with identification to then want to buy from said business. So now I'm not saying, hey, the US is doomed to fail. What I'm saying is, well, the US in itself is very competitive and one of the hardest market to advertise in because CPMs are higher. And so therefore you have to have a much better and stronger back end where you have better cost of goods, right? So to make it work to kind of counter this is you have to have better COGS. So, better COGS where you have, better costs and whatnot with your suppliers. You have to have a higher LTV, right, to counter that. And you somehow have to personify the business a little more than any other market out there, okay? And so you can either stay in that market and just kind of try to find new ways and tactics to differentiate yourself, which is what plenty of businesses have been doing. Hell, that's what we've been doing with about 80% of the client pool at the agency. But there's another way, okay? There is another way. And that way actually is going out of the US, as simple as that, okay? And so I've seen many brands native to the US starting to go in other markets and or businesses as an example. And this is, I think, one of the craziest things. It's like, I'll talk to Eastern Europeans or I'll talk to North Africans or I'll talk to people in the Latin American market. They're like, yo, I want to start an info product, business in the US, or I want to start an agency, or I want to start an e-com brand. And I'm like, man, why don't you do it locally? Like, you better than anybody else understand your local market. You understand the culture. You understand the wording. Why don't you take what you see working in the US, localize this offer, and run it locally, right? Or if you're an American struggling locally, now you can take whatever you have or whatever you see working for your competitors in the US and export that into another market that is less sophisticated and less competitive. And now let me give you an example of Mexico, okay? So if we go in Mexico right here, the average CPM on Meta across every industry, okay, is, I'm not sure if you're even ready for that, it's 0.92, okay, out of every single industry together. So in the US, that same CPM average across every industry now is of $20.48. It costs you, let's just round these numbers up, about 20 times more to advertise in the US and reach the same amount of eyeballs as it costs you to advertise in Mexico. Now, what is that reason? There's less competition. Now, before anyone out here, I'm already hearing the people saying, yeah, but that's because the market is not as scalable, or the market doesn't have as much money, or the market... Sure, okay, the market may not have as much buying power as the US does, but wouldn't you prefer going into a market that has a little less buying power, which means you reduce your prices, but you can reach 20 times more people? And I can tell you that Mexico does not have 20 times less the buying power than what the US has, okay? It's not because your AOV is $50 in the US that suddenly you have to slash that by 20 in Mexico, okay? It doesn't work that way. Instead of selling something for $50, you might have to sell it for $30 as an example in Mexico, or maybe $25, so half or roughly of what it is in the US. But you're gonna be reaching more than 20 times the amount of people on average, right? That just kind of gives you some numbers to think about. And I've seen that the same, like some of the best and strongest and most scalable businesses I've worked with in the last year and a half, I'd say, are now starting to be in non-US markets, okay? I've had businesses in Mexico, I've had Colombia, I've had Chile, I've had France. I've also seen, obviously, the Dutch market. The Dutch market's starting to be a little more sophisticated. For whatever reason, there's just like a bunch of dropshippers coming out of the Dutch market, but nonetheless, Dutch market. And those are just a few that, like, top of mind, we've scaled clients to incredible heights. I'm talking $30 million a year in the Dutch market. We're talking multi-seven figures in Mexico, Colombia, Chile, or like 8 figures in the French market, okay? Those are incredible numbers. Now, it's not to say, once again, that it's impossible to hit nowadays in the US. It's just actually on the flip side, or on the opposite, it's much easier to attain these numbers now in non-American markets. And so I implore you watching this, if you are not from the US, start in your local market. If you are in the US, start considering going in other markets. There's this small trend I'm noticing starting to build up in the dropshipping space, in the agency space, in the info product space, where people are starting to rip with offers outside of the US. Depending on when you're watching this video, I might have already released or about to release very soon a video showing like how I use AI agents to localize ads, which basically I extract scripts from some of our winning ads in the US, and I just translate those and then localize them in the local language, and then create a new ad from there and start ripping in that new market. And one of the videos I shared on this channel a couple of months ago, I was talking about how we helped one of our clients hit their first $1 million month and first $100,000 a day. Well, guess what? About 30 to 40% of their business comes from outside of the US. What they've done is exactly what I'm talking about in this video. It's English ads that they've simply localized and adapted to non-English markets like the Spanish market, the German market, Dutch, so on and so forth, okay? And they've been able to rip in these markets by utilizing the same exact strategy they have in the US, just localized to a non-US market. Now, big difference is when I use the word localize, I don't use the word translate. Translating means you just change the words from what they are literally in English to the other language. And as a French native speaker myself, you know that, if you're bilingual, if you're not just an English speaker watching this video, you know that translating with AI or whatnot is not exactly fully accurate. Like, you would want to actually adapt the words to sound more local. There are expressions that perhaps you use locally that you wouldn't use with the translator, that Google Translate might not be able to do for you. And so the specific client I'm referring to right here, that which we had a case study a couple of months ago, actually has one person on staff, one freelancer per market that they have. That then what they typically do is they use their winning ads in the US, they use AI to do a translation, and then they send this translation for review to a localizer, which then can just quickly approve or change a couple of words about it and then send it back internally for editing. And so that creates a pretty rapid flow for expanding again outside of the US in non-US markets. And that's a positioning that I've started to take also the agency. We're being a trilingual team, right? Where we do French, Spanish, and English advertising. We're now helping clients in the English market go out to both the French Canadian, French from France, and Spanish markets, either in Latin America or Spain, to expand, their horizons and reach more profits from said markets. And so if that's of any interest to you, check out the first link in the description down below to book in a call with myself and the team at paidadvertising.com today for us to become your Meta, Google, or TikTok partners. And that said, if you simply want to work one-on-one with me to have me review your paid ads, your offers, funnels, name it, check out my Ad Engine Inner Circle, which is the second link in the description down below to join today. On that note, I'm going to wish you an amazing day. Check out other videos on the channel for some more useful e-commerce marketing tips, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.